in a special education classroom with an active IEP and behavioral intervention plan.
Okay.
These are legal binding documents under the federal disability law. These documents are created by myself and the special education committee, which forms an ARD, and we go over everything to place in this for safety for everyone.
That's good.
ABLE has this plan in place that requires staff to do specific things when he becomes overwhelmed. There's numerous things in.
Well, there's a difference between overwhelmed and getting into a fight. Because, you know, I could understand that for autistic children, there will be moments where they will be overwhelmed. But unless there's something written specifically in there on what to do with a fight, I don't think you could compare being overwhelmed to being in a fight.
A bit, but there's a couple of main ones that really trigger to the events that happen. Some of those are giving him space, avoiding a power struggle. Yes, we know you're the adult, but take a step back.
Wait a minute, wait, stop. Now, what are we talking about taking a step back? Because when they call a principal, or when they call people to help out, and the principal like walks in the room, and then the motherfucker getting chairs thrown at him, well, shit. What could they do at that point? What could be done to help out in that manner? Because it's clear that they taking that step back. It's clear. But then they did it in their eye.
Allow them cool off time. Use protective barriers if objects are thrown. That's a big one. These support exists for one reason, to prevent a child in distress from escalating. But what happened next is why my 12-year-old is now facing 13 years in TJJD, and it all started inside of a special education classroom. People keep asking, what did Abel actually do? Here's what happened. On August 15th of 2024, Abel became overstimulated with another child in the classroom. While in this classroom, he had a sensory overload that continued to build with another special needs student in the classroom. A book was thrown, yes, and we do not condone throwing of objects.
You just went for like 30 seconds talking about how, hey, if something gets thrown, hey, move out the way.
The classroom was cleared out like protocols require. The teacher was doing everything right. She did call for an AP or security to come down and help her de-escalate if needed.
Okay.
After the room was cleared out and the teacher stepped back in after all the kids had been moved to the hallway, Abel was sitting down in the middle of the classroom and he had started drinking his bottle of water, which was a documented coping strategy that usually gave him a period to calm down by giving him the space. But instead of giving him the space, as soon as the assistant principal walked in, she moved into close proximity. Abel stood up and moved away and verbally asked for space. He warned that if they kept moving closer that he was going to throw a chair to make them back up. But
please, for my own sanity, please do not try to pin this on a principal for having limited information about what's going on, deciding, hey, I'm going to go in there, try to figure out what's going on, like a principal would, and without recognizing what's really going on, walking towards student, and student just starts chucking shit. And you got put in this circumstance because you didn't pay attention to protocol. I'm sorry. That's not how this should go. Because while you have these guidelines put in place to make sure that your child ends up in scenarios that are safe for him and also for the other people, we can't distract from needing to step in to figure out how a fight breaks out between two special needs students. And in the process of trying to find that out, chairs start getting thrown and a woman's eye is now completely useless because of a coat hanger.
Instead of backing up, he was backed into a cubicle and the situation just kept escalating from there due to a power struggle. Here's the part that most of you haven't heard yet.
Okay.
When the larger objects were no longer available because the assistant principal would not give him enough space, it kept sending him into a huge stressor. So Abel started throwing smaller items, which included like a jacket, a book, a couple of other things. But the one thing that was in the classroom that we have yet to get an answer as to why it was an ABU classroom, a special education classroom, was a coat hanger. So with the chairs that had been thrown across the room, had slid across the room, in whatever form and fashion they were distraught in the room, this assistant principal had a chair in her hand and was deflecting all of the different things that were being thrown.
I mean, wouldn't that also be a good thing? Because who among us wants to have a chair just thrown at them? I don't care if it's a small chair or one of them blue chairs that you could just pick up and fling. Nobody wants a chair thrown at them. And also, if a coat hanger's in the room, that would imply that maybe somebody's jacket is in the room, a sweatshirt, hoodie, something.
Which, might I add, they're supposed to use the pads and special protection when this is happening. As in the video of the day of the event, the actual teacher is setting all of this up for the assistant principal to use. Instead, she uses a chair to block the hanger. The hanger was not directly thrown at her, but in the direction of her to...
So it wasn't thrown at her, but it was thrown at her direction, which means that it was thrown at her!
request more space, to push back. The assistant principal hit the hanger with the chair, and the hanger ricocheted off the chair and struck her in the eye. Abel never said he wanted to hurt anybody. And there is something that people need to know about autistic meltdowns. When children with autism, with DMD, they enter a fight or flight mode, and their brain can regress developmental. At 11 years old, Abel's functioning during a meltdown can resemble a 5 or a 6-year-old. That is a neurological crisis, not a calculated intent. Yet Abel was still charged with assault causing bodily injury, which requires intent to cause serious harm. But no evidence showed that. Evidence showed that Abel repeatedly requested distance, the attempt to retreat backwards, throwing objects to regain his distance between him and the assistant principal.
See, that right there, that's the part where you lose me on. Because you're throwing things at said individuals, which will imply the intent that you're throwing them to cause harm. Even if, you got it all written down that he'll do these things to back them all up, to get them away, they're not really going to look at that and say, oh, he's doing that as a defense mechanism, especially when you have a woman who's been blinded because of someone throwing things at her.
And an injury caused of ricochet of deflection. Intent was never proven. We don't understand why this happened that day in deep thought. This was a 1 in a million freak accident that happened. But in all reality, if the behavioral intervention plan was followed, this incident would have never occurred.
So now we got to it. You wouldn't, ma'am, who's now lost sight in her eye, who can't function at 100% anymore. It's your fault because my guidelines that we've all signed and documented, you didn't follow. You are at fault because you just didn't allow someone to throw things at you, which I don't really trust would be something that anyone would allow, even in protocol. There should be ways to navigate these things proper. But shit get thrown out the window when things start getting thrown. And when you have people with limited information as to why people are getting into a fight, of course they're going to go in and wonder how things started, who escalated what, so that they could go about proper consequences to give out. When you have somebody in there throwing things, a lot of the protocols going out the window. And to get on social media and tell people that your son is facing 13 years, of course people are going to want to stick with you and support you, but then there are going to be other people, like me, who will say, now hold on, you can't necessarily expect me to have sympathy for you and your son when you are putting all the fault on somebody losing their eye, not on your son who threw something, but on somebody who's walking into the room and getting things thrown at her.
There should be no justice for Abel. And please tell his mammy I said it. Tag it below if you want to. I really don't care. You, ma'am, did not raise your son. You let the diagnosis of autism cloud your ability to be an effective parent. So when he went down to that school and flung that hanger, hit that lady in the eye, even though she still has an eye, they're probably going to have to take her eye eventually because of the extensive damage. And you want us to start a GoFundMe and fund you getting him? No, he needs to stay in there longer, because when he gets out at 26, you're probably raising somebody that might do more damage to other people. So he is exactly where you wanted him to be because you did not parent him, and that's in jail. And there won't be any justice for Cash when his mammy, and JB also, because he be putting hands on her too. So what do I know?
I have opinions about this controversial case with the autistic boy who threw a hanger at his principal, causing her eye to come out of the socket. This educator was left permanently blind after assisting a teacher in being attacked by a student in August of 2024. The boy's mother says if the school would have just followed the IEP when he became agitated, none of this would have happened. He doesn't think he deserves to go to a juvenile detention center, certainly not for 13 years. But let's take the school out of it. Let's say her son was in public when he became agitated. Maybe he's at the movie theaters and the cashier is out of the brand of candy he likes, which makes him so upset that he throws an object at their face, permanently blinding them. What do you think would happen then? He would likely go to jail, because at the end of the day, disabled, neurodivergent, or otherwise, certain behaviors cannot be tolerated in society because they're a danger to us all. And you don't waive your rights as victim to a violent crime just because you work in a school. And in my opinion, this is typical boy mom behavior. We all know there is a certain brand of boy moms who coddle their sons and don't think they have to face the consequences of their actions. This is a sad situation because there is a lack of resources in the schools, but that burden should not be the teachers to bear. Maybe he shouldn't get 13 years, but he should have to pay for what he did to this woman.
If they would have just let him stay sitting in the middle of the classroom drinking a bottle of water, since the incident before the principal walked in had already been de-escalated, this wouldn't have happened. A lot of you badmouth and bash our parenting, but what you don't know is we've been very proactive. We have...
I'm not really bashing your parenting. I would like to trust that you spend dedicated time navigating how to deal with your autistic son, whether it be in private or in public. I would trust that you know how to do that. My issue here is you pinning the blame on what happened to a woman's eye on said woman and not broadcasting and demonstrating the full story in scope in letting people know, hey, all of this happened from point A to point Z. But instead, you went from point A to point F.
Taken Abel to the doctor. We have done everything that we need to do since he was 3 years old. We've placed him in inpatient treatment. We've gone to residential treatment facilities. We have given him all the care and need that he wants. This has nothing to do with bad parenting. We advocate and we're very involved in all of Abel's care, including the school.
Good.
During testimony in the courtroom, it was testified that I never miss a meeting. I never miss anything. The school knows that I'm very involved. With all this being said, I just want to let you know Abel's side of the story. The situation had been de-escalated. He was sitting in the middle of a classroom. His space was invaded. His stress level got super high, in which set him in a fight or flight mode.
So wait a minute. Okay, so let me see if I got this right. Kid gets into a fight. It's been de-escalated. They've cleared the room out. This is the most cartoonish way to depict this. This kid is now sitting in the middle of the classroom, sucking on a water bottle. Hopefully it isn't Dasani. And the principal comes in, because in any school, once they get wind of a fight, they're going to come in there to try to figure out what happened and who's going to get the phone call to their parents first for starting the fight. And the kid just starts hurling chairs because, as you put it, his space was violated. Well, I'm sorry to burst the bubble, but your kid got into a fight, which is going to lead to somebody getting a consequence brought upon them. Detention, a suspension, maybe depending on the circumstances of it, being expelled. And that would require finding out what happened, which will then lead to a phone call to you or the other kid's parents in saying, hey, your kid started a fight, come down here and you about to find out what's about to happen to your son. But we couldn't get to that process as quick as we wanted because your son decided, fuck it, whack-a-mole.
So he started throwing things. The assistant principal used an unauthorized object, i.e. the chair, to deflect things.
To defend herself from things being thrown at her.
That were being thrown, in which the deflection caused the ricochet, which caused the injury. There was no intent. Abel's not a monster. Abel doesn't deserve 13 years. We do not condone the throwing of things, but we also don't condone injustice from Navarra County.
Well, the justice system is often something that doesn't net out the best circumstances. And I'm going to be honest, 13 years, I'm going to say that's a little bit too much. I'm going to say, considering how I've also seen autistic teenagers beat the ever-loving shit out of their teachers for taking their Nintendo Switches, I'm going to say 13 years for this is too much. But he got the 13 years, and so here's your response to that, because I could already tell you're doing such a great job.
We have done everything that we can to address his every need. We do not use his diagnosis as an excuse or condone his actions.
You literally have done that. You used it as a means to chastise the woman who has lost her eyesight. you used that as a backdrop. You sat there and said, hey, if you would have known how to actually defend yourself against an autistic kid wigging out, oh, you wouldn't have you did that. You did that.
While we are truly and deeply sorry that Miss Rogers for what she went through and for the pain and trauma this incident has caused, my heart as a mother generally goes out to her. Miss Rogers, I am deeply sorry that this has happened.
Yes.
This is not anything to do with victim blaming. As many of you said, this is not a personal attack on Miss Rogers, but it does raise serious concerns about failures to follow his behavior intervention plan.
Motherfucker, you doing it again. You just said a second ago that this is not about this, it's about that. You just sat there and said you're not using it as an excuse. You just did it again. I'm sorry, but people follow the rules. You documented all the things about your son. Your son gets into a fight. They trying to figure out how this all escalated so that they could probably navigate who to call, who's facing the consequence, who's being separated, all of it. And in the process of that, a teacher is getting things thrown, a principal is getting things thrown at her, which then leads to her losing her eyesight. And you are making it out to be, hey, well, if you would have just followed proper protocol instead of defending yourself from things getting thrown at you, oh, you wouldn't lose your eye. You're doing the thing. You're doing it right now. And that is making people look at you and say, what the fuck? You don't know how to raise your kid. What the fuck? You don't know what you're doing. And it might be a bad criticism to throw at you. But when you are sitting here doing the thing that's making people criticize you, it's your own fault. It's your own circumstance that you put yourself in. Because all you got to do at this point, well, not at this point, because now your son is in juvie for 13 years. What you would have had to do at the point in time is collect all information and hope that you could bring all of that to court and maybe the justice system would treat you fair. But instead, you're prioritizing, for some reason, getting on social media and trying to, at the same time, while saying, oh, well, my heart goes out to you, principal, this is another. But if you would have followed these protocols, you wouldn't have had this problem. No, I'm sorry, but that's not how this is going to work.
Many of you have criticized our parenting. You said we didn't take accountability. That's simply not true.
Okay, I just had to make sure. Ma'am, when I think to myself what accountability looks like, it's difficult and people will have to tiptoe around it. And I can understand why people would have to tiptoe around it, because you're dealing with an autistic child. Here's what you do. When you're the one that does the bump and grind to create said life, and then you go and do all the checks with the hospital and you find out the kid is autistic, you then navigate life in making sure that the kid is all right in private and in public and making sure that there's really no problems. And even still, you're gonna run into those problems. And then you run into the problem, which is your child getting into a fight, and now you find out when you get to the school that he's also blinded a teacher or a principal in her eye. You don't then go, oh, well, did she follow protocol? Because that's not taking the accountability of what your son did. That's looking at what your son did and then looking over there and be like, did you follow protocol? Because, if you follow protocol, he wouldn't be throwing things at you and you wouldn't be having to defend yourself. That's not holding accountability in the highest of regards. That's trying to find a way to shift a little bit of the blame somewhere else.
You don't know what steps that we have taken. You don't know the progress that he's made over the years.
It's all out the window.
With the right medication, the right support, the right therapies, he's come a long, long way.
Proud of him, but oh my God, he kind of pissed it away.
And again, as for accepting responsibility, we went to trial. We accepted the responsibility.
But you again, this is like the fifth time, have decided it would be in your best interest to chastise the principal for not following protocol.
What we are asking for is not for him to avoid consequences, but to make it very, very clear. We're not asking for him to escape accountability or responsibility in any way. We're asking for a reasonable, fair sentencing.
You're not going to get that. Sorry, and that's not even your fault. That's the justice system. The justice system is a fucked up thing that allowed a person who deserves 75 years for violating 2 teenage girls get community service. I'm sorry to burst anybody's bubble, but you're running a gamble with the justice system. Whether it be local, it be in another state, it be at the federal level. You are running a gauntlet. You are running the gamble of trusting the justice system to give you a fair shake, whether it be a fair consequence or justice for some atrocity done to you. You are running that. And, you might walk out getting everything you want. You might walk out getting something you don't want, whether that be a harsher sentence or somebody walking scot-free. You're running that risk all the time. And to expect or to hope that you could potentially get something just outright, foolish. Wanting better care towards your child in a situation is fine. But when your child does something that warrants people figuring out what took place, it has to be looked at. It has to be reviewed. People got to get the story and how it started and who threw the first punch and whatnot. But in the middle of all that, when you got somebody throwing a chair, it throws it out the window. It throws the potential of people getting things done orderly out. And now you got somebody who in the moment is getting things thrown at them. She don't know what the fuck to do. So she just grabbed the first thing just to defend herself, and it ends up with her eye now being useless to her. Of course, people are going to look at that and be like, all right, Buddy's got to face some type of a consequence. I'll be honest, the 13 years, kind of nuts. But in that span, he's going to have to get some form of treatment or medication while he's sitting in there. And maybe they'll fight for that to get it shortened over time. Maybe they'll get it appealed so when maybe he walks out scot-free. Maybe they could hopefully get the principal who has forgiven the kid to hopefully advocate for him to be released early. Maybe. But what we can't do in the midst of trying to seek advocacy is throw in these little jabs that make it seem like you're blaming the person who lost their eye. And that is what's garnered all this criticism towards you. That is what's garnered a negative reaction towards you. Do I think it's racial? No. But when we're sitting here talking about why people are not caring or why people are saying it's justified he got this sentence, and then they see you sitting there saying, oh, well, if you would have did this, this wouldn't have happened, that's going to leave a bitter taste in people's mouths. So good luck in the efforts of trying to free your son or getting the sentence shortened. But next time, just PR advice. Don't try to do it while blaming other people, because that's always going to go over terribly.